Happy Sunday. And proceeded. That looks pretty good to me, Stephanie. Let's find a comfy seat. And we'll just ease in to our physical space and then allow that ease to expand into our breath. And then let's start to draw out the last 10% of our exhale so that we really slow that last 10% of our exhale down. And then the more that you elongate, the more that you slow down, note how there's that desire to really energize and pull quickly onto the inhale. And see if you can just relax that. Don't necessarily feel like you need to change the speed or even the energy of that inhale side of the breath, but see if it can just be more at ease. Let's give ourselves 60 more seconds here, just elongating the last 10% of the exhale and relaxing into the inhale. And we'll softly allow the eyes to open. Inhale our hands together at heart center. And then create a little bit of pressure in between the finger mounds and the fingertips. So, it is a recharge class, so no more than 20% energy, let's say, but really feel that connection there. And then let's just shift that connection towards the right with the right hand resisting until the hands line up with that right shoulder. And then note how the shoulders are kind of rounding forward and see if we can draw that back. And then let's shift over to the left. See if you can keep that awareness on the shoulder expansion here. And then we'll come back to the right. Staying with your breath. It's easy to forget the breath here with the pressure in the hands. And then one more time over to the left. And we'll relax. Let your hands either come to your hips or behind you, whatever feels most comfortable for your shoulders. And let's lift our chin. And either way, hands on the hips or hands behind us, let's roll the shoulders back and get that anterior expansion. And then squeeze down into the glutes and lift the chin up and don't allow the low back to arch. So extending into the spinal column and then relax. And let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. A little bit of extracurricular shoulder awareness. Bring the lumbar into neutral. And you may want to walk back on your mat. You may not care where your positioning is, but we're going to extend our left arm out kind of until it is fully extended but still integrated. And then just sink back until you feel the left shoulder capsule start to respond to that pressure. And then we'll pull ourselves forward, return to a traditional tabletop, bring our spine to neutral. Right hand's going to do the same thing, reaching out, and then just sinking back until you feel that right shoulder capsule start to respond. And so that goes down that lateral edge of your body. You might wrap around underneath your rib cage. Just going to kind of depend on how sticky the lateral chains are. And then we'll pull ourselves forward and sink back into child's pose, but really think about deactivating the shoulders so that as you get into the depth of the shape, everything is kind of focused on that lumbar space. Transitioning that upper back room we've created into low back capacity. And we'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here, but use this to refine that breath cycle. Elongate the exhale, relax on the inhale. And it's a very counterintuitive experience relaxing on the inhale after that elongation of our exhale breath. So really put some energy or effort into allowing that to happen. And then let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop, and we'll extend our legs out in front of us. A little traditional staff. Remembering that you can bend your knees, we're going to take ourselves forward into a fold. This is a essentially non-warmed up fold. So be gentle.
And last 15 seconds here.
And we'll bring ourselves up into staff. Bend both knees, bottoms of the feet come together. And now we're back into that low back as we take ourselves forward into the modified seated fold. You have a lot of choices here. We can keep the back as flat as feels comfortable. You can go into that flexion shape. We're just looking for some expansiveness. There may be some stickiness in that medial line that may restrict your capacity for lumbar expansion, and that's okay. We're just kind of getting a baseline of capacity here. Last 15 seconds. We'll walk ourselves back towards feet, and let's transition back into hands and knees tabletop. Lay those fingers out wide, curl your toes underneath you. Let's roll our seat back into down dog. We're not going to spend a lot of time in these upright positions, but we will walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift, and then create your half lift. So we want this upside down L. And then we're going to exhale and elongate that last 10% of our breath. So as you're releasing, that last 10% is expanding you into the fold, and really feel the lumbar respond. Remember that the knees can bend. If the hamstrings are restricting the lumbar expansion, bend those knees and allow the breath to settle into your low back. And then we'll drift our awareness to our sacrum and half lift once again. So maybe an unroll to half lift, maybe a more traditional experience of half lift, but then create your half lift shape, create that upside down L. And one more time, exhale and elongate the last 10% of your breath. Remember here as you land that there's two parts. We're elongating and we're relaxing into the inhale. And then check in this inverted position on your heart rate. Check in on your respiratory rate and see if you can slow both of those down with ease. And then let's plant our hands. We'll walk back into down dog. This will be the last down dog of class. Come down to hands and knees. Sink back into child's pose. And settle here in child's pose. Think about how the entirety of the spinal column is responding to this second time in this shape. And when it feels right, when you feel ready, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And we'll once again extend our legs out in front of us. And so we were just here. We have done a couple of standing folds, and that's more or less the only difference. But I want you to take that big inhale breath. And then as you exhale, think about that last 10% of the exhale being elongated and settle your way into this new forward fold capacity. So there's this little idyllic village surrounded by streams and forests where this very well-known cobbler has a shoe store. And in this town, or this village, of these two sisters who have just moved out of their parents' home and are making homes of their own, making lives of their own. And the older sister and the younger sister have a lot of personality differences, and they always have. Last 30 seconds here. Really allow a continuation of that extended 10%, last 10% of the exhale breath. And really allow for the experience of relaxation, even when your body wants to rush that inhale back into you. And then we'll walk ourselves up into staff, bend the feet, bottoms, bend the knees, bottoms of the feet together, and we'll take ourselves forward and into fold. Again, finding that breath. Again, allowing for that capacity of expansion in the last 10% of the exhale, and then the relaxation on the inhale. We're not going to be here quite as long as we were in the extended leg position. But this is a little more back specific lumbar focus. So see if you can feel the expansiveness settle into the lower half of the back. And eventually, we will walk ourselves up to a vertical spine. Let's grab our blanket, towel, pillow, bolster props. You may or may not need both. We're going to do one last sequence of forward folds. This time we're going to be supported. So if we have a big bolster like I have here, you may only need the bolster. If you're using a pillow and a blanket, you may want to stack those. Essentially, what we're looking for is a supported forward fold where we can be completely deactive in the musculature. So, or as deactivated as possible in the musculature. And so finding your way into a fold, the arms can rest on the bolster. They can extend out in front of you. They can even be behind your head as long as that's not putting strain on your neck. Anywhere that feels comfortable, allow yourself to feel supported in this forward fold. And this is a lot more seated forward folds than we would normally get into. Very posterior chain specific. And so the younger of these two sisters has always seemed to be the more fortunate of the two sisters when they were living in their parents' home. She's more carefree. She's more spontaneous. And she has less worries about the world. The older sisters more or less have opposite traits. Tends to be more on edge, more prepared, more thoughtful and deliberate. And as they move out from their parents' homes, these two traits kind of create divergent experiences. The older sister, with her deliberateness, plants a garden very early in the spring. The younger sister kind of frolics her way through the farmers markets. Last 20 seconds here in this supported fold. And we'll lift our torso back up. Our props here are going to elongate. So we want the prop to run the same direction as the mat, no matter what prop shape we're using. And that's going to come down in between the feet so that we have that's not a very good way to show that. So that we have a prop in between the feet, but if the prop wasn't there, the bottoms of the feet would come together. And then we have a prop in front of us that, again, if you're using blankets or pillows, can be folded in half to elevate. If you're using a bolster, you can fold this in half as well, right? We want to be able to come forward into a little butterfly shape with some support for the forehead. And then the arms can, if it feels good for the back, extend out in front of you, or they could just be palms up kind of next to the feet or on top of the thighs if that feels more supportive for your shoulders. And I know this is an awful lot of seated forward fold shapes in a row. The good news is this will be the last of our class, and the seated forward folds go to our bad news depending on how good this is feeling for you. really think about 10%, last 10% of the exhale breath being elongated, and then the relaxation of the inhale happening right at the top of the lumbar spine, where the lumbar and the thoracic spine are meeting. Really think about the inhale settling there. And so by the time midsummer rolls around, the older sister is canning fruits and vegetables and filling her root cellar with jar after jar after jar after jar. And the younger sister, of course, is taking a different approach. She's removing the windows on her house so that the breeze can more freely flow through her home, so that she can be more at ease and enjoy the beauty of the summer months. Last 40 seconds here. And we'll eventually take a big, full inhale breath. And then think about as much elongation as is possible through the exhale breath. And then we'll walk ourselves back up towards seat. Let's take, if you're using a big bolster like this, that might be all you need. We're going to put that behind us. If you're using a pillow and a blanket, make sure that it's long enough so that you can have support for your spine and head. So props are running the same direction as our mat, and the props are roughly bumping up against the sacrum. You adjust based upon your torso geometry, and then we're going to head down. Oh. For what is a very large back bend. So we have been flexion, 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 and now we're going into a big extension. If it's too much, please lower the height. We have lots of options here. You can go all the way to one layer of blanket or towel if that feels appropriate. Legs can be extended, bottoms of the feet can be together, knees can be bent, whatever, again, serves you best. And so as fall approaches, the older of the two sisters is meticulously going around her house. And she is finding any spaces that aren't airtight. And she's filling them in with little shreds of cotton. Anywhere where a draft is coming through, she's filling it in. The younger sister, on the other hand, is spending her time putting the windows back on her house. And while the older sister is out in the forest collecting firewood, the younger sister is out on her own adventure, admiring the beauty of the fall leaf change. And we're going to give ourselves 90 more seconds here, really counteracting all of the flexion work that we did in our forward folds. Now, your choice. You can roll to one side or the other. You can press yourself up towards seat. Either way, we're going to meet in the seated space, bend both of our knees, and let both of our knees fall to the left. And as the knees fall to the left hand is going to come over to the right side of the prop. And we're going to walk ourselves down into this twist with our prop underneath us. Now, if you got low because the extension just didn't feel good, remember that you can raise the height of this prop. The more height you have in the prop, the less twist you have. So if you take the prop out here, this is a deeper twist than if we have the prop underneath us. So where the prop was accentuating or exaggerating the back bend in the last shape, here the prop is aiding us, assisting us in making the rotation less intense. And we just ease into this space. We'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we'll lift ourselves back up, let our knees return to neutral, and then let them fall right over to the second side, the right side. Right hand comes over to the left side of the mat, and we walk ourselves back onto our prop for this twist, side two, or not onto the prop if that's your choice. As it so happened, winter came early that year, and it caught the entire village somewhat by surprise. The older sister, with her preparations, was the best prepared of anyone. And the younger sister, with her freewheeling, free spirited choices, likely the least prepared in the entire community. And so, as the winter winds lashed across the village, the younger sister's home had drifts of snow creeping in through the cracks, and no firewood or food to warm her. And so she reached out to her sister, who had done the work of preparation. And with plenty of food and firewood, and warmth in her heart, she welcomed her sister into her home. Last 40 seconds here on this second side. And when it feels appropriate for you, let's press ourselves up into seat. We can push those props out of the way. We won't need them again, but if you want them for Shavasana, keep them handy. And then we're headed onto our backs to appreciate the fruits of our labor. And so over the course of the winter, the older sister worked with her younger sister on the ins and the outs of canning food, cutting and splitting firewood, building fuel-efficient fires, stealing drafts in her home. Give ourselves just about 40 more seconds here, just appreciating this neutrality against our spine. And over the course of the winter, the two sisters had so much excess food and firewood from the older sister's preparation that they began to share their resources throughout the community with people in need. And the younger sister began to appreciate more and more the efforts of her older sister. She began to learn more and more the ways of her older sister. When it feels appropriate for you, let's inhale and bring our knees into a bent position so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling, and then start a little dynamic movement left to right. Just seeking capacity for rotation, the integration of the upper and lower half of the body, how the lumbar spine is responding to all the work we've done. And then the next time that the knees fall over towards the left, let's let them settle there. And so as spring started to roll around,
the mayor of this little village was so grateful for these two sisters that he reached out to them how the village itself could thank them. And they suggested the best way would be for a community festival, a spring celebration when spring eventually rolled around. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Find some balance here, maybe even lift yourself into a little bridge. And then eventually we'll let both knees fall over to the second side. When it feels right for you, as it feels right for you, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Realign our spine. Ask ourselves if a bridge would be appropriate, if there's anything that would be beneficial, that would be needed, that could be helpful before Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that to ourselves. And if we have everything we need, if we're ready to settle into some stillness, let's allow that to happen as well.
Eventually, winter lifts and spring arrives. And as promised, the mayor holds a festival in the honor of these two sisters. And the entirety of the town gathers, celebrates, and at a closing ceremony, everyone is gathered around this huge bonfire. And the mayor brings the two sisters onto a stage so that he can address them in front of the community. When you're right, when you're ready, just stillness. And so, inviting these two sisters on stage. The mayor addresses the town, thanking them for their generosity, for the impact they had over the winter months. He says, your generosity, your kindness, your giving has reminded our community of an often forgotten but simple truth. And he looks at the older sister in particular, and he says, just like your gardens bloom with your care, so does our fate bloom with our actions. And we'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Into our wrists and our ankles. Elbows and knees. Shoulders and hips. Neck and head. Jaws, eyes, ears, if you can move them. Eventually, we'll allow the entirety of the body to move. And we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. Finding this vertical spine, fluid breath. Allow your eyes to close. And with your next inhale, we'll bring our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that it is not fate that determines our lives, but our actions that determine our fate? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Love the heck out of you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Have a beautiful rest of your Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move around a little bit. If I don't see you then, I hope you have a beautiful week. Mwah. See you soon.